Hello, and welcome to this LARKI pre-design event. My name's Lucy Appleyard, and I'm going to be your host for this evening. Now, this is LARKI's first in-person event since the pandemic, since we've come out of the lockdown, so it's really lovely to see you guys here in person. We're also joined by some people who are joining us virtually, who are on Zoom, so hello to everyone who's watching us online this evening. Now, if you are at all interested in 3D point clouds, in LiDAR technology, or in church architecture, then we have got one hell of an evening for you guys tonight. I personally think there's something incredibly special about church architecture. If you think of some of the world's most incredible buildings, many of them happen to be places of worship as well. If you think about La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, the St. Mark's Basilica in Venice, or the Notre Dame in Paris, all of them stunning examples of ecclesiastical architecture. Now, sadly, as you may know, the Notre Dame burnt down in a freak accident in a fire in 2019. But fortunately, an American art historian had painstakingly laser scanned the entire cathedral. So now he has a 3D model of the entire cathedral, which he has handed over to the renovation team, who are now using that to restore the building to what it was before, with highly accurate detail, which is incredible. It's really amazing when this type of technology is used for good. Now, what's the plan for this evening, I hear you ask? Our first speaker of the night is Simon Cookes, who is the CEO of LARKI, and he's going to be telling you all about their new product features to their online platform that are ready for you guys to try out and test. So well done to the LARKI team, who have been working really hard to get those features ready for you all. We're also going to be joined by Fred Batterton, who is the Director of Studio B Architects in Melbourne. He's also author of the acclaimed book, Making Property Serve Mission, Rethinking the Church's Buildings for the 21st Century. After that, Fred and Simon are going to take part in a Q&A. After that, we're going to invite you to take part in a few polls using an app called Slido, which I'll tell you about in a minute. After that, we've got the prize draw, and we've got some amazing prizes, so stick around for that. Because to be a winner, you have to still be here in person or be on Zoom. So make sure you stick around for that section of the evening. After that, the main event will be over, but you can stay around for some networking. We've got the team from LARKI Melbourne who have flown up especially to be here with us this evening, so you can ask them all your burning questions. We've also got teams from here and Metro Map, who you can see over there. So you can go and speak to Metro Map about 3D aerial data, and you can go and speak to here about 3D streetscape data. Now, before we get stuck into the main part this evening, I wanted to let you know that I've made some jokes for you. I know these events can be a little bit, heavy sometimes, and I want to keep you all laughing and entertained. So I've got some jokes, and they happen to fit into 3 categories. They are architecture jokes, which is pretty handy, really. They are religious architecture jokes, which is even handier. And they are also dad jokes. They happen to be some of the worst jokes I've ever found on the internet, and I've stolen them for you guys this evening. So the first joke of this evening: who did Noah hire to build his boat? An architect, of course. Get it? Noah's Ark boat. That really is the worst one of the night, so they do get slightly better from here, but not by much, so don't expect too much. So, on to our first speaker of this evening. Has anyone been to a LARKI event before? Put your hands up if you have. Yes, a few of you not putting your hands up. So that's okay, because our first speaker of the night is the CEO of LARKI, Simon Cookes.
Thanks, Liz. Joke really was terrible. So Slido, just so you're aware, that is coming towards the end. So all you need to do is either QR that, and everyone's very familiar with QR these days, or sli.do in your phone, put in that little code, and then you can give us some feedback about the jokes. So yeah, I'm very excited to be here tonight to present this new chapter, the next release of the LARKI platform. But really why we exist is to support the architecture community who have been working tirelessly as usual, creating environments that really bring us together and let our spirits kind of rise. So thank you to you guys, but also thank you to our customers, and there's some here tonight, including Fred, and also some investors are here, and just supporters in general, so that's great. But let's kick off. So LARKI, what we specialise in is providing exceptionally detailed 3D surveys online. So for architects, it's really about saving time. Modelling is the main thing, other things as well, which we'll get into. For other stakeholders, whether you're a property owner, a planner, might even be an objector, there's some tools there that you can jump into the site remotely from anywhere in the world and kind of make some measurements, also to save your time. But really, at the end of the day, it's for the property owners, the people that pay in the bucks. You know, if you can speed up the project, that also means reducing holding costs, which is great. So just a quick intro. So yeah, I've been an architect, or in the architecture industry for 20 years. I used to work at firms like ARM. Daniel Moore, who's sitting over there. Do you know, stand up and say hi? There he is, Daniel Moore. So he's our Chief Technical Officer. So he's the software guy. And he used to work at firms like just SRO, so you can't really get much better than that. And we've got an amazing team as well. So scanners, we've got Tony and Jin here tonight, modelers, software engineers, and sales, finance. And there's some guys in Lisbon, we've got guys in Melbourne and Sydney and all over the place. But tonight we're going to, a little bit of background, a little bit about our customers, a little bit of a comparison about the old way and the new way. But the cool bit is really what is the different types of data, and how then we can convert it into an architect's model. So taking it from the laser scan data to BIM and the platform. So data, architect's model, and then the online experience. So a little bit of background. I used to work on projects of this kind of scale for ARM a long time ago now. Highly awarded firm. And I was the BIM guy. So for people in the room who don't understand BIM, can you please leave? No, I'm just kidding. It means building information modelling. So it's a kind of the latest generation, I suppose you could say, of architectural modelling tools. And more than 80% of architects are using some form of BIM these days. So it's definitely the industry standard. Wasn't back then. It was a real struggle to get ARM onto it, but now they are. And I remember back to those days when, you know, as a young architect, I had to go out on site, and I was tasked with this, measuring up a whole commercial building once, which took me months, and heard about 3D laser scanning, and I was like, why are architects wasting their time and customers' money doing things that they do, frankly, poorly, with not enough accuracy, not enough detail, and slowly, when this machine could do it way better. I was teaching final year architecture at Melbourne Uni at the time, and kind of got sucked back into doing some research. So I really went down this rabbit hole of what 3D information tools can really support that process, from land surveying, so what's on your site, to architecture, designing it, and then planning, approving your designs. And some of the interesting findings was that 98% of architects use some form of 3D, software that is, but only 9% were using the 3D data in their software. So clearly there's a bit of a weird gap. Everyone was complaining of this really inefficient workflow. So you get a 2D DWG, which is like literally a line drawing in a computer. You might have to scale it up from meters to millimeters. You might have to rotate it. You might have to count bricks to estimate height. So there's all this unnecessary grunt work that goes into architecture. And someone needs to pay for people to do that. But this was the biggest, which is that there's just not enough information. There's only so much that an architect with a tape measure can give you, or a 2D land survey. And also errors were starting to... Oh, yep, sorry. You can all hear me, right? And errors were starting to creep in as well. So when there's errors in your documentation, then you're at risk of running jobs at a loss, even getting sacked or in litigation. So we want to avoid that. While I was doing that research, I was actually Airbnb-ing the front room of my house, and I was thinking, well, how do we bring this sharing economy that's working so well in other industries into the spatial industry? And, you know, there's lots of this kind of really great LiDAR data out there. How do we pull that in to get a really comprehensive data set such that it's more affordable, so all projects can start using it, and then architects have the best information so they can do their best design, really accurate stuff, and then other stakeholders, we've got some tools that we can give them so they can jump in and measure, because really you've got these projects that end up in tribunals or in law courts arguing about existing conditions, but you know, the real world is the real world, so you shouldn't be arguing about that. We should be arguing about proposed, not the existing. So this is what that helps get over. But really our main customers are property owners, so whether you're a developer, planner, facility manager, and for them it's about reducing risk. It's also about making the most of every square centimetre, or cubic centimetre of your space, and reducing project delays and reducing holding costs. But for architects, and which includes building designers, draftees, engineers, landscape architects, it's about professional indemnity and risk. It's about really getting the best info so they can do the best work. More time to focus on design and maximising productivity and profit. This is just some testimonials from some of our clients. So saved us a lot of our time. He's obviously, we're focusing on church design today, and he said God sent, which was cool. But this one's even cooler. He said, whoa, you know, I didn't know how to spell that word, but that's how you spell it. And James was saying really about bringing certainty and precision, and he said it was an essential tool. So, and we've got some really great top tier customers now, like JLL, Victorian State Government, Deakin University, some John Mortal guys over there, the current gold medal winners, Anglican Church and FJMT and many others. Really briefly, if you weren't aware, this is kind of the old way of doing things. So you've got a 2D feature survey, and you've got these like roughly 100 site data points on a little project like this. So each of these little numbers there, that's a site data point. So only 100. And what happens is that, you know, this data point here, and it could have been taken on a weatherboard wall or a rough, you know, or could be in between bricks or whatever. They take it from a random spot and then basically draw this line in between. And what you'll find is that that line is actually not accurate. So these way of doing surveying is actually more diagrammatic than it is accurate. And I'll prove that to you in a second. So what happens is when you're out on site and you find that something doesn't fit, and it might be something expensive like structural steel or joinery, or it could be something just as cheap and annoying like the tile patterns not lining up. But you know, that can be really costly to fix. People are getting sacked and even sued because of these sorts of issues. So really, instead of only 100 site data points in 2D, what LARKI does is we supply up to 30 million in 3D for that same size project. And instead of waiting around 4 weeks to get the information, we have files now that we can deliver in minutes, which is very cool. And no land surveyor is really going to go out on site for anything less than about $2,000, whereas we've got some data that we can sell for as low as $250. So it's really 300,000 times better resolution, 700 times faster, and up to 8 times cheaper, which is amazing. In terms of the workflow, I mean, the old workflow is architect gets engaged, they get quotes for a surveyor. Usually 2 surveyors will go out on site. They'll go back into the office, draft something up, goes to the architect. Architect does their own measurements, builds it up to does their own existing condition 3D model. So this process takes about 4 weeks and about 4 people. Whereas what we do now is go on larki.com.au, search on the map, pay, track your order, and then download or view straight away. So one person can do that. And like I said, we've got some files which can be delivered literally in minutes. So one person in days or sometimes minutes. In terms of price, so the old way of doing things, you might say, okay, well, I can get a feature survey for $2,000. But then there's a cost to going and doing measure ups. There's also a cost of interpreting that information and converting it into an architect's model, which takes time, and an existing plan. And then you still don't have enough information, and so you'll have to go respond to requests for information from planners or builders. There might be some errors, like I mentioned before, which means that you might have to rework things, which is expensive. And then, so there's the real cost of existing conditions is closer to 10 grand. Oh, subtle, so subtle. And then, so it's really what we're trying to do here is get rid of these bits. Measure ups, RFIs, rework and delays. So because how we do that is you start with way more information that's way more accurate. So, so like a tripod laser scan might be a little bit more expensive, but you're not having to do the measure ups, and there'll be much less risk of delays, RFIs, that kind of thing. We often do some of what's called the BIM, the architectural modelling, so converting that laser scan data into an architectural model. So we often do some of that for our architect clients, but more and more we're actually doing all of the existing conditions for them. So it's not just some laser scan data and some modelling. We might provide lots of different types of laser scan and all of the modelling, a feature plan, providing them with some viewers so they can view it online, and some really high-res aerial photo maps. So a common kind of offering would, you might get some streetscape data, some tripod data, and some interior data. We might convert it to a BIM file and then serve it up online for you. Just to compare some of the different types of data, it's really exciting that we've got a huge amount of data now in our database. So we've got over 1,500 square kilometres. That is a large amount of data in Larki's database now that we can provide really quickly to our customers. So that's how we can make it in minutes. So this is an example of the amount of data that we've got in Melbourne and Sydney, and we've also got some data in Brisbane that we're going to launch soon. But there's different types of data that have different pros and cons, and so usually what we will do is you'll come to us and we'll kind of package it together for you in a way that's fit for purpose and the most affordable way. So if you've got a large sort of precinct, it might be a whole CBD or a park or something like that, that's a large area, it might be early stage stuff, then aerial is the right choice. Aerial is taken from above, from a plane, so if facades is more something that you're interested in, then the streetscape data together with the aerial data is a really good combination. Also very quick to get and very affordable. The tripod data is slow because you set up a tripod and you do a scan, you set up another and you do another scan, and so boots on the ground. There's people who've got to go out and actually do that work. So it is quite a bit more expensive. But it's way more detailed and accurate than those other two sources. So it's really great for your particular site. So the other two are good for your broader context, and this one is really great for your actual site. Drone is good. It's higher detail than the aerial. You might have a high neighbouring fence or some mechanical equipment on a roof that you want to see. And obviously you don't want to be flying a plane or driving a car inside, so we'll tripod inside. This is an example of the aerial data. So you can see this is in Balmain in Sydney. So the aerial data is really great for roofs and ground, but the facades aren't amazing because it's captured from above. It's very affordable, and you can get a really large area covered and jump in and do some measurements. To give you an example of combining all of those four, so this is for a church job that we did in Five Dock. And so at the moment we're just showing the drone data, so a little bit better than the aerial that you saw before. And now we've just turned on streetscape, so you can see that from the car, the broader context was shown quite well. But still the facade, because it's been blocked by a tree here from the front, so we needed to tripod scan that, so we went out and tripod scanned it, and now you're getting some really great detail of the facade. So you can see things like the windows and doors, buttressing, heritage detail, and you can measure that to a really high degree of accuracy. We also interior scan this one, so this is the platform, so what we call the 3D viewer, so you can cut the top off the building, and you might want to see what's going on the inside there. So you've got, you can see the floor, and there's like a flag, and so all furniture, anything that was there on the day will be in the scan data. If there's people walking past or birds or things like that, we'll usually clean that out. But all the fixed things will be there. So you've got, you can see the fans and I forgot what that's called, Fred. What's this called? Pulpit. Pulpit is there. Would someone say hallelujah? Hallelujah. Yeah. So that's the laser scan data, right? So that's captured with this laser scanning equipment. But really what the laser the output of a laser scanner is what's called a point cloud. And all it is really is points in space. So it's a XYZ coordinate and an RGB value, and just millions of them. So when they're all together, you can get a really detailed view. A BIM model, or building information model, is then converting those points into architectural components. So walls, windows, doors, roofs, that sort of thing. It's not as detailed, but it's much nicer for dimensioning and for architectural documentation. So what we do is we convert that laser scan information into an these architectural components in the building model. So you might want to get the ground surface with the contours, a low level of detail of the walls, and now you can start doing shadow studies. You might want more detail, so windows and columns, roofs, and doors. Same for the interior. You might see some floors, interior walls, and some interior detail. This is what it looks. You're in the architect's world now, so this is a very expensive BIM tool called Revit. It's probably the industry standard, and it's got point clouds built in there natively. So really, for an architect, we're providing them with the data that they can then use to do their designs. So now what we've done is we've imported a 2D file, and now what we're going to do is import a point cloud. And so you import it origin to origin, and we make sure that it's all in the right spot for you, so you don't, all that grunt work that I mentioned before about moving and scaling and rotating and counting bricks, you don't have to do any of that anymore. So you can see how quick and easy it was to get that point cloud in there. And being a BIM tool, it's a 3D tool, so you can view it in 3D like we showed before, or in plan. And so we've zoomed in plan. You can see that old school kind of 2D line that assumed things were straight, and in reality it's anything but straight. It was warped, it was kinked, it was bowed. You can see over here, so the line's sort of touching here and touching over here, but then in reality it's close to 90 mil out. So 90 mil is not cool in architecture world, just in case you were wondering. But a line drawing is helpful. So I'm not saying don't use line drawings anymore. I'm saying use both. When you're in design mode, you want accuracy, so you show the point cloud, and then you can go to something more abstracted like a drawing or a BIM model later down the track once you're comfortable with the accuracy. And being a BIM tool, you can cut a section. You can see here the walls are not straight in section as well. You can see here it's obviously a weatherboard wall and it's quite wobbly and it really bows out here, and you can sort of hover over points, and you can see there that the roof itself is also not straight. It's sagged. So nothing's straight in real life. And it's really great also for things like streetscape elevations. So this, instead of wasting a junior architect's entire day or days doing a streetscape elevation to a level of detail that we were much lower than this, and planners wouldn't understand and therefore request more information. This went through Port Phillip Council in Victoria with 0 RFIs, and the architect was like, what? I've never had that before ever in 10 years of being an architect. And because planners really love it, you know, it's like you can see the heritage detail, you can see the actual chimney, you can see an actual tree. It's not a circle on a piece of paper, it's an actual tree with branches and leaves. So planners love it. This, and now the moment you've all been waiting for, the platform. So we're in the platform now. This is the dashboard, and now we're on the 2D map. So you might have a site. This was actually a John Wardle site, was 90 Bridge Road in Richmond in Victoria. So you can see it will tell you what data is available in that area, and being in Richmond, everything will be available. You can then, if you're a LARKI subscriber, you can get access to Metro Maps high-res aerial imagery, which means you can zoom right in, so it's not like Google satellite view. It's much, much more detailed. And then, you know, you can order the data that you want in a really kind of accurate way. There's different tools for doing different types of shapes. So this is for the streetscape data. The path tool is a good one. You can swap back to the map view if you want, and you might want to do a bigger area for the aerial data because it's much cheaper. I think there's a tower over here and they're doing a little tower here, so it was good to see that. And then it will add it all to your cart in a way, accept the terms and conditions, and off you go. The Richmond project. Boom. You can tell us what software you use, and then we'll deliver it in a file that works in your software. So you don't need to know the file types. That we do that work for you. And one of the new bits is this file manager, which I'll show you now, I think. So if you want to kind of dive into what's going on, so this is brand new, got launched yesterday. So now you can see all of the details of your particular project. You can see who ordered what when, and download links. So it's really easy to kind of track what's going on, and you kind of just in time sort of delivery of files, and you can also really easily share it with other stakeholders. So it could be people in your office or other your client or whoever, and then really easily go across to the 3D viewer and do your own dimensions yourself from any time or anywhere. So this is just to show you the 3D viewer. This is another church job in Bexley that we did in spacesuits during COVID. And you can see here that you might want to crop out your particular building. This is the difference between a point cloud and a BIM. So there's your BIM file there. And you might want to dimension a door, so you can go in there and perfectly vertical dimension, boom, yep, there we go, 2,494 millimeters. You might again want to see the interior, so really easily you kind of chop the top off it. If it's a multi-level building, you could kind of go down levels and really easily sort of compare that. And it's got a really cool section tool as well. So we showed sort of the 3D, turning off the different layers of the different types of data. So the aerial, point cloud, drone, tripod. Showed you the BIM and the point cloud. Now we did it in plan. Now we're sort of showing you in section. So you can cut in section here and move back and forward in the model. And okay, well there's a pendant light there that I want to see how much head clearance I've got to that. 3,215 millimeters. How cool is that? You! So yeah, very exciting. Very easy to now get access to your site. If you are a property owner, so you're doing a one-off project, we'll get you on what's called the project starter. That gives you access to the dashboard and file manager and 2D map that I showed you before, as well as the 2D high res and the 3D viewer. And it also gives you a data allowance. So it's usually enough for kind of a small project, whether it be a house or a small commercial. If it's a bigger project, then there might be an additional cost, but you get a discount. Once the sort of design project, the design part of it is finished, so you don't need any more data, but you might be into construction or even facility management, then it'll roll over to what we call the viewer essentials. So you don't need any more data, so that bit's gone, but you're still getting the viewer and all that. Once the project's completely finished and you don't need any of the viewers anymore, because we've got to pay our partners for that, so we don't have to charge on that tier anymore. So it's much more affordable, and we're just going to store the files for you, and you can kick back into the viewer at any point, and it's kind of seamless. You don't have to have reams of plans and things in your basement that get flooded and then they're lost forever. We'll keep them for you. If you're an architect and you've got many projects going on at once, then we got you on what's called a multi-data pro. So it's very similar to a project starter. Only difference is it's longer and you get more of a discount. So it's cheaper, basically. Same stuff, but cheaper and ongoing. So much better to do that if you're a professional. And there's different ways to pay it too. So we've got different sort of payment periods. Thank you very much for kind of getting through all of that. Just to really quickly summarize. So it's about reliability, millions of points, done by professionals, backed by insurance. We've got a huge amount of data in our database, so we can provide you with significant discounts, and which means reducing your in-house costs, which, because we're doing the modelling for you, that's saving a lot of your time, and it works in your software, or you can just jump on our web viewers and do it that way. So compared to the old way, on aggregate, what we do is much average, is quicker turnaround, more affordable, and support from architects that kind of know what your pain points are and can help you out with them. Less mindless work, you don't want to be modelling existing conditions, you want to be doing design, so you don't have to do as much of that. Greater productivity, which means better profits, and for the project itself, you can really optimise the design, less requests for information, less errors, and much less of that stuff. So that's it. We're about converting reality into a 3D model within a few clicks of a mouse. And if you want any more information, you can hit us, or you can follow us on socials, but you can hit us up here. Luca's here tonight. Luca, stand up here. So he's waving over there, and or myself, and then we've also got Tony, Jin, and Emily here as well to help, and Daniel. Great. So now we're going to hand over. Are you going to introduce the next Lucy? I can't wait. More jokes. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Great, thank you, Simon. You guys are ready for your second joke, very deserving. Why did the architect take so long to get started on her church blueprints? Because she couldn't decide which font to use. Get it? You know the thing at the front with the holy water? I know, it's bad. I did warn you. Now we're going to hear from Fred Batterton. Fred's special interest is to make spaces that enable people to develop meaningful relationships. This passion has been applied to making church complexes and heritage buildings into multi-purpose venues. Fred has designed schools, university buildings, including for Oxford colleges back in England, multi-residential, aged care, student housing, and community buildings. As an acknowledged architect for church communities in Australia, it's a great privilege to have Fred here today talking about his pre-design process, including the use of 3D surveys and BIM for his church designs. And whilst they are just plugging that in, I'd like to remind everyone who's watching online that you can comment on the Slido website.
Whilst we're getting going, I'll just give you a brief introduction. My name's Fred Batterton from Studio B Architects in Melbourne. Previously from a director of a practice in the UK, and you'll see some examples of projects from there as well. We want to thank LARKI, our sponsor for this evening, and we've been using LARKI surveys for several years. Great for complexity, for accuracy, and it avoids having to make assumptions and fudging it, which is what many architects used to do, I'm sure. We'll very soon get this presentation up on screen, and we think we're just restarting the projector. Okay, good, it's on the side screen, so we can press on. Good. So some of the things that we've been doing with LARKI, you will see this is a church in Melbourne, which we needed to know all of the issues around that. We needed to explore so we could repair various parts and then carry out some improvements inside. It's now a community centre 7 days a week, 6 days a week, and 1 day a week it's used by church. And it's in use all the time for various activities for the community. We needed to know exactly what all those hidden roof shapes were so that we could work with that and carry out the improvements that were needed. There should be another one. Let's just see if we can... No. The second building there was a school project of ours, that, and that is some 100 k's from where we're based, so it was really important to have an accurate survey that we could work with. So I want to talk today about a really useful pre-design exercise that can happen whilst the 3-day survey is being done. And I've also set up an organisation independent from Studio B Architects called Missional Identity that will help church communities to re-evaluate their property. Quick plug for the book. It's written from a faith position and a passion for architecture. And And it's written primarily for church leaders. It's available in hard copy and ebook on Amazon and a book depository, most online booksellers. I've got a few copies here for those people that are in the room if there's any interest. But I want to take you this evening on a journey through ownership, the principles of shelter, providing comfort, the contexts of various types of building projects, what we think about purpose, the problems that get encountered, and then a solution and some outcomes. Property ownership. The Christian church worldwide owns an awful lot of real estate. The Washington Post said that the Christian church has at least 370,000 buildings, and it's probably got the world's most significant group of heritage buildings. Now, this wasn't one of our projects. It was built about 800 years ago, and even before my time. But there's another property owner come on the scene recently that you may have noticed, and they have been going for about 50 or 60 years, and they've got an ambition to be a big property owner in the world too. We're going to make some comparisons a little later. I just want to talk about the fundamentals of shelter. As human beings, we started off thinking, we need to keep out of the sun and out of the rain from time to time, avoid the wind, and as far as we could, avoid fire. So shelter became an important thing. For the church, there were meetings in houses in the early days, in the catacombs under Rome. This building was actually not built as a church. This building was built in 310, and it was built by the Roman government. It was built as a community meeting place. At the start of that, churches were still illegal. And it became borrowed by the church. So borrowing is an element that's consistent. This was built 1,700 years later, and it's a thermal chimney absorbing the sun's heat and powering the ventilation and cooling system in a passive way. I've taken you on a long trip of history between these two. But I just wanted to say that this is all part of shelter. This is how we are dealing with shelter and creating comfort. In terms of comfort, ergonomics are really important. If people are going to be sitting down listening to things, they need to be comfortable. These chairs have been in use for over 20 years. They get moved several times a week. And there are various elements of that become really important when you're thinking of how to organize a building and give it flexibility. Now, you might think that the next slide is a bit odd when I'm talking about comfort. But it was important in this project to create a level floor in the building. So to create a level floor for disabled access and for a space that we could use in a number of different ways, we had to excavate the floor. When we did that on this project in Oxford, we found 60 burials under the floor, and we had to reinter some of those where they're within the concrete formation level, and we created a building that's now really flexible. In terms of comfort, we can think about environmental responsibility. We now can build to zero carbon, and we can go beyond that to climate restoring if we choose. Passive House is a way that is teaching us the principles we need to follow on that path. And that's something as we get closer to targets for 2030 and 2050 that we're going to need to think about. Comfort can also be a subjective thing. It can be an aesthetic thing. We often value heritage buildings. We think that contemporary buildings should also be reasonably attractive. Being in a space that's a good proportion needs to feel right, whether it's heritage or new. For church, sometimes that's referred to as transcendence, a feeling of being in relationship with God. I want to look at, next section is about types of buildings. So, new build. We might be building new spaces. We might be adapting buildings. This is a church in Tasmania, which bought a 1910 wool warehouse. It was far more volume and space that they needed, and they let out lots of it to different organisations. But they got it really cheaply. And it works very well. Sometimes we need to extend buildings and create additional space. This is a front extension to a 1950s church to create a new office and entry. Sometimes we need to upgrade and we need to add things. In this particular case, we relocated the main entry and presented the church entrance to the main street. Sometimes we get the opportunity to redevelop excess property that the church doesn't need anymore, creating value for the owners to reinvest, sometimes upgrading property, but also building community by creating a community around the existing buildings. I went to see a client a while ago and they said, the church used to own all this property around here, and look, it's been sold off, and we're now left with this small piece in the middle. And I said, okay, so if you owned it now, what would you do? And they said, we'd sell it off. And of course, their predecessors have been doing that. So let's look at core business. We build to serve a core business, not just the brief that we're given as architects. And we know what the core business of McDonald's is. It's two things. It's to provide food, and it's also to acquire real estate. So core business for McDonald's is pretty clear. If we look at the church, then the core business was declared by Christ. Love God, love your neighbour, go make disciples, teach, love one another, look after the vulnerable, forgive people. Jesus made no mention of acquiring real estate, and yet the Christian church has become one of the largest property owners in the world. What should it do with its buildings? I'm going to look next at the basic purposes. Core business, worship, gathering together. Families gathering, including teaching, kids. This is the same space with the kids event. Gathering together to support one another and become a community, looking after one another, asking how those vulnerable relatives are getting on and how people's health is. Just general providing support. Also food and hospitality, looking after the vulnerable, gathering around meals, providing places for kids to enjoy. This is a playgroup taking place in that same church I showed you earlier. The chairs have been cleared on the Monday and kids run around on little bikes and scooters. This church runs community concerts. This is the church that I'm a member of. And it just is an entertainment element for the community, a place for gathering. And we there are a number of talented musicians, so we followed various themes. A Christmas community celebration taking place, obviously pre-COVID, because the social distancing is not what we'd been restricted to recently. Now local purposes. Now those were general things that the church might do, but there are local things that churches might take on to respond to what those basic purposes were. This church set itself up in a suburb that had no community sports centre. So the church decided it was going to build one. And the church runs all these things for the community church is just one element of the life of the community that people can pick a postcard for and attend, or not if they want. But it just decided it was going to bless the community by being the provider of that facility. And the church meets in the sports hall. It's not acoustically very good, but that's okay, because they're focusing on other things. This one has a cafe with a view, and it also has a conference centre. The cafe is a great place for people to gather or just drop in during the week. My link is not working. This one let out some of its spare space to a gym franchise. This other one actually runs a kids' play centre within the facility. But there are lots of others. Business centres, affordable housing, English as a second language, places for refugee support, where you park your vehicle for your mobile soup kitchen, and lots of others. So there are loads of local responses that people can make if they've got that demand in the area. Next, I want to talk about property problems. So sometimes the church feels it's the curator of old buildings. It's actually looking after the history of the community. And repairing these buildings is costly. When I come across churches in that condition, I sympathise, but I also say, yeah, but it's cheaper than having to build a new building every 50 years, providing you keep up the repair condition of it. Because some of these buildings will have lasted 150 years. This is the interior of the one that you saw the model of, that LARKI did the survey for. We've improved that and made it into a new facility, which you'll see in a minute. If you don't upgrade as a church community, then you finish up often selling a building. And this retail space in Paddington is a really good use. The retail sector can really make a building sing, and they've used it well. But if nothing is done, it can get really serious. You can finish up with a historic monument that you're trying to keep. One of the issues is the problem of irrelevance. The church building in the street, when you say church to most people, they think of this. It's not particularly inviting to society today. Even contemporary buildings can be unattractive. Another problem that churches have to cope with is discord. Trying to get members to agree on change can be really difficult and can lead to division. And when you're trying to run a church as a leader, you don't want that. And the too hard basket becomes often the place. Leaders are trying to pastor a group of people, comply with regulation, provide weekly services, run baptisms, weddings, funerals, lead meetings, manage funding, caring for the community and pastoring people in distress. Don't have time to think about buildings. This sign was in a pub in the UK. It's not in a church, but there is often that feeling, and leaders have to contend with all sorts of views. So they complain that buildings are a costly distraction. But many people identify with their building as a sort of iconic clubhouse. And there's often a resistance to change. But if you think back to this whole principle of what the church is trying to do, it's trying to be a platform to teach about faith. Then it creates a different brief for the project. So churches are not making the most of what really is a valuable asset to fulfill their mission. And, lack of consensus thwarts projects. They may be poorly adapted, they might be unsuitable, they might just have passed their sell-by date. So what we have developed is something we call Missional ID. And we think this is something that can transform the church in Australia and beyond. So it's a simple tool to unite members around an agreed mission, and then to uncover a property strategy that will deliver it. So its aim is to make the property of the Christian church enable the work that Christ called it to do. It's a 3-stage process. It involves 2 questionnaires. And after those 2 questionnaires, we then develop a feasibility study. And that we call it a master plan because churches usually can't afford to do everything at once, and you have to stage it. So a range of questions have been developed about purpose. And they're in different categories. They suit all denominations. We refined and developed it over 10 years. And we give a church a link. They send this link out to their members, and it says, what are your priorities? What do you think God's calling you to do here? And the top ones are shortlisted. Now, I don't expect you to read that list, but that's the question list that goes out in a different format, and it asks people, what are you doing now in these areas? What do you think you should be doing in the future? And because they can't do everything, we focus on the shortlist. The shortlist gives them a direction. And then we take that shortlist and we send another questionnaire out to the people that have had any leadership activity. And we say to them, how good is your present building going to be at serving these new priorities? Will it be effective in enabling this mission? And we get shortcomings identified. The deep red is completely ineffective. The pink is partially effective. And this gives a really clear picture of how the current facility is not going to meet the tasks that the church has. And that then, we can present this on screen, and we can say, your kids' ministry needs improved space. It's really poorly provided at present. The place that you get together now isn't working. And you have said this as a group, as a client. So we can then come up with a process and a solution to resolve those issues. Often people come to us with a brief of things they want in the first place, and you combine that with that information. It's put on screen, it's explained to everybody, and it shows how that's going to benefit their mission. And sometimes, like this particular project in South Australia, this is an example where the church owned all this property. It had a single-story building that was deteriorating. We found that the planning authority were encouraging a 6-story development in that area. So not only did we propose a 6-story development with some retail on the ground floor, because it's right on the edge of the town centre, we actually focused views through to a new main entry point on the church as well. So it started to create the church as a centrepiece of that community, which is what they wanted to be. So concept master plans are presented to everybody. They're designed and clearly linked back to that declared mission. So they've got that clarity from the start. You get consensus because people realize that you're going to be proposing to build something that's going to help the core business. People saying, well, I've always sat in that pew and I just want to carry on doing that. We think, yeah, you need to sympathize, but it's a furphy in terms of getting to the real core business of what the church is trying to do. And you then are coming up with solutions that are clearly linked to purpose. And it's likely to proceed, and it's likely to be supported by the members. This is just an example of one that we have presented, and how we show the ways of how the various elements develop, circulation, Sunday use, hospitality, weekday uses for the facilities, for conferences, for weddings, for drama events, for seminars, at festivals when you might get an overflow, how you cope with that, welcome and hospitality, and how the spaces are going to achieve those various elements, and then how we get views and light around the place. So we've had some really positive responses in terms of how this process has played out. Those, and I won't leave that on screen very much, but outcomes now, just to finish. So this is the Surface Church, creating a space that's well lit and enjoyable. This church has developed from just one service on a Sunday. It now has 3 services on a Sunday to cope with the membership, which has grown by 3 times. This is that slightly dull-looking heritage building, which we've relit. It's now got a much larger platform. Drama events can take place on that. We've improved the heating and the cooling system, and the lighting now means that you can see that nice heritage roof structure. This is the space that I showed you earlier. They've decided they can move the platform, and they do, around the building for different types of events. For a few months they had this central location. But the entry point really needs to be inviting. And finally, I think you've succeeded when you create a queue to get into church. So I'm happy to speak with architects, with church leaders, any potential financial supporters, so we can take the process to the next level, make it available cheaper online. There's an opportunity to provide a service for church communities and architects to make church buildings more effective for its mission throughout Australia and throughout perhaps the rest of the world, just by focusing back on purpose. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand back to Lucy. Okay.
Thank you, Fred. I'm actually going to invite you to stay up on stage because the next section of this evening is a Q&A. So we're going to have Luca, who's going to pass around a roaming mic, and we've also got some questions online. And whilst we're setting that up, I think you guys deserve another joke.
Oh, thank you.
How do church architects make sure they're designing the church properly? They check the cross-section.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be here all night.
The plan of many of them is a cross-section.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Fred. That was really interesting. And good to see that we've been able to support you in the work that you've been doing for some years now. I think we're up to about 8 or 10, something like that, yeah. So, questions. Do we have any questions from the audience, or is there any online that you want to start with, Emily? There's another mic here, Luca, if you want. Just right there.
Yep, so we've got a few questions coming in online. So firstly, we've got a question here. Do I own the data I order through your service?
Yeah, very good question. So whoever captures the data is the owner, and you get a license to use it, basically. It's same with architectural design, same with fashion. You know, you buy the jacket, you don't buy the pattern to it, you know, like, or photography. But yeah, so that's how it works. So if you've bought it for a particular purpose, whether it be, well, I mean, if you're coming to us, it's probably an architecture project, then you're free to use it for that architecture project as much as you like.
Awesome, thank you.
Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, absolutely right. That's just the same with us. You know, we produce a design. It's there for the client to use it any way they like in connection with that site. Yeah.
Perfect. Another question, does the LARKI tripod scan model offer 360 images of existing interiors, or is it just the point cloud?
Sorry, what was that?
Does the LARKI tripod scan model offer 360-degree images of existing interiors, or is it just the point cloud?
Okay, the 360-degree images. Yeah, we can provide that as well. There's a tool called Recap. I'm not sure if that person was referring to that, but yeah, we can provide that. It's just wherever there's a tripod set up, it will take a 360-degree photo when it does the scanning, and that's how it colorizes the points. So yeah, we will have that data. We don't often provide it because there's an additional cost, and it looks nicer to have it in a photo form rather than a point form, but you're kind of fixed into that location, whereas when you're in a point cloud, you can kind of navigate around it as much as you like. So, but yes, is the short answer. Don't think you can really add much to that one, Fred. I don't think.
No, I think so.
Are there any questions in the room?
How big is a file of like a building? Like, are we talking like megabytes or gigabytes, or just out of curiosity?
Yes. So we found that generally anything over a gig is going to be too big. There's a project that we did for a group in Melbourne. It's this project called Nightingale Village, and it was there's 6 different buildings done by 6 different architects, and we actually pitched on this project and we didn't win originally, even though we were told we were about 30% cheaper. A top tier surveying firm ended up doing the work, but then we got a call from the project manager saying, oh, you know, sorry we didn't give you the job, but the architects don't know how to use this, and it doesn't seem to be working. And I was like, yeah, no worries, we'll charge you a fee and fix it for you. And what we found was that this surveyor had provided a 13 gig file, and it was in a file type that only one of the architects could use. And so when that one architect out of the 6 tried to open it, it crashed their computer because it was a 13 gig file. So it was a bit of a fail. And so what we did is it's called decimating it, which basically fancy word for getting rid of a lot of the points. We tiled it, so we gave this bit to these guys and this bit to these guys, and we did it in different file formats so that, and we checked it because we're architects ourselves. We know the deliverables that they're after, and we make sure that it's going to work for them, and if they have any issues, we hold their hand. But yeah, so that's the kind of the file size thing. But for people that don't have the architectural software like Revit or ArchiCAD, you don't even need that anymore. You can literally click a link or jump on our platform and press the play button and go in and be viewing and measuring. So So file size when you're kind of doing it through a web browser is kind of irrelevant. Good question. Thank you.
I've got a question. Is completely. I'm not involved in the property industry at all, but I would imagine that your services and your scanning software is able to look at buildings, the current office space within CBDs around the country, and assist in transforming them into something slightly different, given we're now getting into a post-COVID world, but it's not the same as the pre-COVID world. So maybe if you can just comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of briefing, if you want to talk about
Sure.
that. Yeah.
I mean, to have that information is there long term, and I think one of the things that's key to that is the building services that are going within that building and the structure. And if you've got a model in Revit developed from a point cloud model, you actually can work out and trace where those services will be. Having that information in the future is really important to be able to carry out modifications at a later date to repurpose something for a different use, like apartments or a different type of office layout, or in fact a community building. And many buildings that we build today, like we say, young people have a number of different jobs. A number of buildings we build today will have different uses.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, as Lucy mentioned at the start, having, particularly for heritage buildings, having that documented in the most kind of detailed and accurate way possible, which is a laser scan, not only is useful for maintenance or facility management, or in COVID, knowing, safe distances between things and replanning spaces, but also if something goes wrong, like a fire happens or something like that. So being able to have an exact record is really helpful. And we actually, they may come back to us, but we haven't done the work for them yet. But Living Museum Sydney came to us because they wanted to capture their buildings more for online tours and things like that. So. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly, people often say, oh, it's the future. It's like, no, it's happening now. It's the present. And yeah, I mean, you can jump into a site from anywhere in the world and yeah, repurpose it however you want.
When I saw online the Notre Dame fire, and I thought, oh dear, all that heritage being lost. And then I heard, but it's had a 3D scan survey, and I thought, great. That gives us that record that can be, in a way, just rebuilt.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure a lot of architects were going, damn, I saw some versions from Foster with the glass ceilings. So I was like,
that's right.
Damn, that got a red
That's right. And the same thing with the Macintosh School of Art in Glasgow. That had its fire, but I think that had been scanned before, which is going to be really helpful.
I think that building's burnt down a few times, hasn't it?
It's twice, recently, They were just fixing it.
They keep doing it back in wood and just, throwing cigarettes around. That's it, exactly. Rennie's not alive anymore, unfortunately.
Sorry, Simon, just one quick question. You might have already actually answered it, but what's the future look like with point cloud converting into geometry? So do you have a team that actually just chooses all the lines and the points, and then you're just modelling system families, or is there going to be some sort of Autodesk plugin where you're actually going to, quickly be able to generate, ID information so you can use it then in sections, plans, details, and all that stuff?
Yes. Hopefully, maybe sooner than this time next year, but we'll have some exciting news on that front. One way or another, we're working on that. I mean, it's called Scan to BIM, and it is an artificial intelligence problem. It's something you create these algorithms, and you've got to feed it a truckload of data and keep tweaking the algorithms, and over time, it will get better at knowing which points equal wall and therefore convert it to wall. And so, yeah, we are making headway with that. It is a very difficult problem, but yeah, it's certainly something that we intend to incorporate into LARKI. So you can order the point cloud information, and then there'll be, do you want the terrain, do you want the walls, do you want this, and you can kind of keep adding that. And at the moment we're doing that, but it's a bit slower and manual.
More manual, yeah. Cool, thanks mate.
I've got one online.
There's a question down here. Look at he loves to chat, Luca. No, that's all right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Luca.
So I could be wrong. Is this working? I don't know. I thought you said that the reason that the clients can't potentially keep the information forever was because of your service partners. So my question was, are you doing all the aerial, all the streetscapes? Is all that data yours, or is some of that being supplied by third parties?
Yeah, so we've got MetroMap and over here. So MetroMap provide the aerial data at the moment, which is great. They've got really great coverage all over Australia and a bit overseas as well, which is pretty cool. And here have got a really huge streetscape data set. It's captured from cars driving down the street with laser scanners on them. So yeah, they're partner data. We have our own tripod-based scanners and drones. So depending on what the application is, we can provide data for that. Yeah, I mean, kind of going back to the other question, it's depending on who captured it, it's their data, and they'll provide it to you under a kind of a license agreement to use it. When I was talking about the bit being turned off unless you pay for it, that's to do with the high-res 2D map, so you know those high-res aerial photos that we showed, and also the 3D viewer. So those tools, there's a cost associated with keeping them running. Yeah. And so if you keep your subscription going, you can keep using that basically. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but there's a difference between the data itself, which is like the file, I suppose, and then the tools to be able to view that data, which is like the 3D viewer, and the kind of the 2D high-res map is like an additional bonus to help you order, but also interrogate your site from the air in a 2D kind of format.
Thank you.
Thanks. That's a good question.
Awesome. I'll jump in with an online one, Simon.
Yep.
From a reliability security point of view, are these files saved in AWS or similar?
Yes, AWS. Next. Yes, super secure. Bezos is all over it. Nice.
I guess this one's to both Fred and Simon. Can I ask, what was the last, have you used LARKI in a mission ID, and can you describe exactly how it was useful for that sort of, purpose,
sure.
Brief?
And a good example is the church in Queensland that we worked with. They said that they'd spent years trying to get an agreement between people on what they should do and where they should make changes. And it was the son of the guy who'd originally tried to make some changes that was in contact with us, was briefing us. We went through the survey process. We showed them the graphs of what the level of agreement was. And he said, we then took a vote on should we go to these alterations. And he said, we had 100% agreement. And he said that was unheard of. His father said, he said his father was in tears because he tried 25 years earlier to make changes and couldn't get people to agree. So just getting consensus has been really important. So you presenting something as a solution which targets what their comments have been. So you're actually reaching that point, which I think is one of the most valuable elements of the process.
Yeah, in terms of getting consensus, I mean, we talk about planning, Fred's talking about clients. I mean, architecture projects are not done by one person. There's a huge team of people, and there's the community that need to get on board as well. And there's really no better way to do that than to show them it in a way that they actually understand it, which is as close to real life as possible. And so an example is there's in Victoria, they were doing an extra line of the train, and so they had to compulsorily acquire some backyards of some properties to get this new train line going through. And there was this one old lady that was just holding up this whole multi-billion-dollar process, right? And they, it was her property, and she was told by a consultant that she was going to have this big kind of it was like a battered ground, so the train goes up at a different level, and she just thought she'd be looking at dirt, basically, from her backyard. And so what they did was they brought her into a consultation where they had the architects and engineers, civil engineers, planners. They're all in the same room. They got up the high resolution 3D model, and they said, "Do you know where you are now?" She's like, "Yeah, this is my backyard." It's like, "Okay, well, what do you see?" "Oh, I see my fence, and I see the shopping centre and the sky in the background." They're like, "Exactly." And they pan back, and they go, "And there is the new train line going through." And she's like, "Oh, someone told me I'd just see a big wall of dirt." And she's like, "No, well, that's what you're going to see." And she's like, "Oh, that's fine, approved." And it can be that simple sometimes, because people don't understand until they do, until they can see it. And so to give them a view that is really rich and really easy to understand, there's no interpretation involved, it's just show them reality, it can really speed up these sorts of getting to consensus. Any other questions? No?
I've got one more here.
One more, and then we'll go to the polls.
How often do you update the data?
It depends. So the Metro Map guys do it fairly regularly. I think it's sort of quarterly. The Here guys, they're driving constantly. So it depends when your bit was driven. But in inner city areas, they're driving more regularly, and in kind of regional areas less so. It could be years between drives. And however, if something has changed in your area, you could get some aerial data and some streetscape data that might be 90% correct, and there might be one building that's outdated in that time, and we can send out a team with drones and tripod scanners just to scan that one little bit to update it, rather than at great expense, tripod scanning the whole area. So you get the cheaper data set for the bit that's current, and then we can kind of update it as required. So one way or another, we'll get you the accurate, up-to-date data. Awesome. Thank you very much, Fred.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, Simon.
Yes. No more jokes? One more joke for later. Okay. Lucky us. So, hey. Hey. We have a new MC for next time. So, could someone accept that LinkedIn for me? Yeah, no, we'll definitely do that. And thank you. So, since we've got your attention, and really what we're trying to do is support you guys, we thought we'd ask what you want. And because even though we've got a team of 15 now, it's still a small team, and we've got to prioritise things. So, what is it that you're most excited about? So you can see there that, which is different to last time actually, that the 3D viewer web app looks like it's the the most popular. I'm not sure how many people have responded to that, but thank you for that. There's still time, so you can still keep voting if you like. In terms of, no one has answered this one yet. So the next one on Slido, what do you feel would be the benefit that you care most about? So is it cost saving? Is it time saving? Is it risk reduction? Do you want lots of detail so you don't have to go and do measure ups yourself? Or is it just the convenience of being able to go up on the platform and get the data anytime, anywhere? That's great. So time saving was the winner last time as well, I think. But feel free to continue to enter that in, and like I said, it's really helpful for us to prioritise what we develop next. So thank you. And the final one is, what else do you want next that we haven't shown you? So some examples would be, say, some really low-res point cloud information. So you saw the aerial one, which was not as high resolution as, say, the tripod, but if you could get it for free, would that still be something that you want? The actual BIM model, so one of the questions was, well, yeah, that's all great, but how do we get, the BIM models? So maybe getting that more readily would be something you want. Maybe refer a friend so you can get some free data. And we've got the topo surface there. The file activity timeline is actually something that we presented. So this was for the poll from last time. So now that's live. So maybe that's why people don't. It's the least priority because we've already got it. That's good. So we'll be working on the 3D BIM exterior walls next time. Thank you very much. So I think that, and of course, keep entering that in if you like. But now we're going to do one more joke and a prize draw, I think. Is that right? That is right. Awesome. Let's do that.
Thank you, Simon. So the final joke of this evening. An ancient Egyptian architect turns to his builder and says, "Do you know how to build a pyramid?" And he says, "Yeah, up to a point." I saved the best till last. You're welcome. And now it's the prize draw. So I believe that we have a name pulled out from random. Oh, but actually, you probably want to know what the prizes are.
Yeah, so we've had some great caps, wine, free data supplied by our partners and ourselves. So it's up to the value of $1,000. So it's definitely worth hanging around for. But if you haven't, it's too late. So Emily, drum roll.
The winner is Craig Carroll.
Craig Carroll. So Craig, are you here tonight? Craig, no. So if you put into the comments, "I'm here," you can get your prize. So we probably should have done that before the polls. Yeah, that would have been a smarter way to do it. Yeah, we live and learn. So what we're going to do now is break up, chat, more drinks, more food. There's Metro Map over there, Aerometrics Metro Map, and here as well. So feel free to go and talk to those guys about their data. Fred's got his book. So if you're doing anything around churches, we're doing a lot of work for churches at the moment, and Fred is the expert of church design in Australia. So the book's over there, there's brochures, and there's still plenty of food. So thanks very much for everyone coming. Did he give it the thumbs up? Should we pull one more then?
Susan Coldwell.
Susan Copa. Cool. We'll reach out to both of them and yeah. All right, cool. All right. Thanks very much. Thank you for your time and speak to Luca as well.